You got your Mac guys here on Birds 365. Thanking Mike Gill for jumping into the mix. Gill, a weekly contributor here for us. He got a little vacay time. He's working while he was out down in Clearwater, but good to get Mike back in the mix. Hadn't had a week without a Gill input in quite some time, so good to have him. Very much looking forward to talking to Bo Wolf. Not only know what he talks about, but he's also got a good sense of humor. So I have some yucks with Bo Wolf coming up in less than 20 minutes. I want to go back and touch on something that we talked about with Mike. And the Eagles, I know the draft is still 5 weeks away, but when they're reaching out and signing potential starting linebackers who before the ink is dry on the paper, you're trying to say, well, but they're not necessarily the starter. Depth is they got to have depth too. So it's a free agency, and the importance thereof is starting to dry up a little bit. So you look ahead to the draft, which could be huge for the Eagles, seeing as they have 2 first-round picks, the 10th and the 30th. That's on paper right now. We've been talking about it all year leading up to the fact that they're going to have a late first-round pick because it's their own, and it ends up being 30th out of 31. Kansas City with the last pick because they won that game at the end of the season. I think you probably watched it, John. I think you were probably there. It probably did a pretty good.
Remember, there's only 31, as you mentioned, because Miami got in a little trouble. So only 31 picks in the first round.
Understood. So the Eagles had the next to last pick, one earlier than you would think it would be. And we've talked about the fact that can be a valuable pick in that a lot of times teams like to jump up into the bottom of the first round because you can sign a player to a 5-year contract, which you can't do in the second round and thereafter. First round picks, you can add that additional year and lock them up. They get the free agency 1 year later. You got to pay them in that last year. It's not like they come cheap. There's a big jump up in the salary in the 5th year, but at least he's locked in and you don't have to worry about free agency. And teams will be willing to do that most times to try and get their hands on a quarterback. Because if you're going to get a QB, you'd like to have that 5-year lock-in position where you know you're going to have the guy for 5 full years. Here's the issue, though, John. Is there going to be a quarterback that teams are going to be willing or wanting to trade up for to get into that 30th position? Everybody now is projecting the top 4 quarterbacks to go in the top 5 or 6 picks in the draft, which I have my own ranking and rating. And I'm telling you, I don't think Will Levis is going to be good. And I think Anthony Richardson may be this phenomenal athlete, not necessarily going to make him a winning quarterback in the NFL. So I don't agree with the evaluation of the quarterbacks to begin with.
But you do agree they're going to go.
They're going to go. Oh, yeah, for sure. Good luck to whatever teams get Will Levis and Anthony Richardson. I'd rather be hooking my wagon to a different horse. The only other guy I could think could be in play at that spot, and again, just me, I'll take a pass because of the age, is Hendon Hooker, who had a dynamite year for the University of Tennessee, but he's going to play next year at 25. He was in college football for a long time. He's got an injury coming into the season. So if you're taking him with number 31, you've already got a quarterback in place. So you're not going to rush the kid along, but you're going to have him for 5 years. Do you think if Hendon Hooker is still on the board and 4 teams at the top of the draft have already taken their quarterback, you think there's a team in there that would be willing to jump up and give the Eagles a second-round pick plus on top just to get to number 30?
Yes. And again, you mentioned it all depends on, I believe it was Daniel Jeremiah who just came out with his latest mock draft, and he had Hooker going early 20s. So, I mean, we all know how desperate quarterback teams desperate teams that need quarterbacks can get. So I do think that somebody would come up to 30 or 31 to get him if he falls that far. And one of the reasons is the option. You know, it's interesting. I asked Howie that question back in 2018, when the Eagles were 32. And that was the Lamar Jackson year. And it was pretty obvious they were going out. And they did. and it worked out for both teams because the Eagles ended up getting, I believe that was the Dallas Goddard year, but I have to look it up. Um, he answered the question in an interesting way because he said it's not just quarterbacks. There's certain positions you want that fifth year option, and there's certain positions you don't want that fifth year option. Running back being most notably, you don't necessarily want it as a fifth year option. There are other positions as well, so it isn't just quarterback, but that's been the history. There'll be somebody willing to trade up, whether it's quarterback, but it's very limited because after you get past Hendon Hooker, then you're probably talking about Tanner McKee, and I don't think anybody's trading up that high to get him. But there are other positions, edge rusher.
Right, but let me ask you about that. What position are you referring to? Just in general, and if you want to, specific this year.
Well, I don't know specific this year, but the positions are obvious: edge rusher, offensive tackle, cornerback.
Right. See, here's the problem with that. If the Eagles make that trade, drop down 10 spots, 8 spots, whatever it is, somebody moves up, and they take a guy at one of those positions you just threw out, edge, offensive line, corner, and the guy turns out to be a stud, well, why didn't Howie just keep him? Why didn't he just take the player?
Always,
at least if somebody trades up, takes a quarterback, and go, well, we weren't taking a quarterback, so I don't give a flying fart who they picked. You got to be careful if you trade down and trade out and they take someone at a position. You could make an argument that the Eagles could have taken and then had the 5-year cushion to keep the guy.
Well, yeah, but you can always play that game. I mean, that's part of the draft. I mean, that's always part.
Would you play that game of quarterback this year?
Unless you get no, because they don't need a quarterback.
That's
but
my point.
Again, but the difference is, yes, they don't need a quarterback, but they want more draft picks, as we mentioned. They don't have a 4th round pick. They don't have a 5th round pick. They don't have a 6th round pick right now as we speak. So how do you get some of that back? If you want to take a running back, say in the 5th round, because the class is so deep, well, you got to find a way how to get a 5th round pick, a 4th round pick. One of the easy ways to do that is to drop 5 spots. Maybe you get a 4th round pick. And when you do that, you're always comfortable with, you got 5 people on your board because you're going to drop down 5 spots that have similar grades that you're interested in. That's the reason you trade down. But everything, look, there's the best player in every draft. Whatever Aaron Donald won in his draft, I think it was 11th. All right, the first 10 teams got it wrong because he was the best fucking player. So unless you get the best, it's always a risk. Obviously, always a risk. But if you're trading down because you're comfortable you're going to get one of the players you want. I always bring up Damonte Smith. The Eagles went down because they thought one of the 5 players they wanted, they knew they couldn't get Zach Wilson. Boy, what a disaster that would have been. They knew they couldn't get Zach Wilson, so they had a group of 5 players that they thought they were very comfortable with, any of the 5. And they fell and they moved from 6 to 12, and all of a sudden they started popping off the board, and only one was left, and they thought the Giants were gonna take Damonte Smith, and they had to go back up and get him. That's sort of how you do it. It's always a calculated risk, but if you're going down 5 spots, if you're going down 10 spots, that's because you think a player you want is going to be there, and you could add stuff on top of it.
And Howie's been very good at doing just that, the maneuvering on draft day during his tenure as general manager. I'll stick to my point of, if it's not a quarterback that a guy's moving up for, and you're saying Howie notes that, there are other positions that people want that 5-year deal. So could the Eagles. They could want a player at a specific position
if you like
where
a player,
they can get the 5th-year deal.
If you like a player, you just take him. But that's far more likely at 10 than it is at 30. You're going to have a group of players at 30 that you like, at least a couple, at least a handful that have similar grades. At 10, you might have one guy and you might want to move down, but you said, we got to take this kid at 10 because he's not going to be there. Even if you're dropping down to 14 or a very small drop, it's much more likely to happen at the top of the draft than at 30, where you're probably going to have, and that's why so many teams want to trade out in a typical year of 32, because the difference between 33 and 34 money wise as well, not just the fifth year as a whole, is much more cost efficient. And the only difference between 32 and 33 is a label. One guy's a first round pick and one guy's a second round pick. But that's why so many teams want to trade out at 32. The value's not there.
Right. And we're making this up as we go along. It takes two to tango. Let's say you're right. Howie's got a group of 5. So we can get out of the first round. We don't have to worry about the extra price, whatever. We'll just slide. But you have to have a team that wants to move up. If you think, well, we'll go from 30 down to 34, but the team from 34 is got to want to move up. All right, we'll go to 35. All right, the team at 35, we'll go to 36. All right, now you don't have that group anymore. Now you're going outside your comfort zone of the players that you would take in that thing. In theory, it's easy to talk about, but then you actually have to put it into practice with the teams that are slotted where they're slotted in the draft, and there may or may not be a deal there to be made. So we can have this
it's always
conversation all day long, but you got to have the right partner that's willing to dance.
Yeah, it's always fans are like, "Well, just trade it." Yeah, it doesn't work like that. You got to have somebody who wants it, and But the good thing from that perspective is there are sort of the new blood of the GMs. They're more willing to trade. They all want to trade. It seems. They all want to add assets. It's always about, that, Jody. It's always about assets. The younger GMs and you saw it last year with Kwesi. I always get his name wrong. Adolfo Mensa. He went down He went down twice from. I think it was 11, something like that. Then he went down. Then he went all the way down to 32. He's just trading down, trying to add assets. There's more GMs like that now. So people are more willing to trade than they were in the past. And Howie usually takes advantage of those younger GMs.
Which, if you can, you should. But some of those younger GMs will be smarter for it in year number 2 than where they're at right now. All right, he's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. Bo Wolf from The Athletic. Been covering the Yankees for years. Been sharing the press box with Johnny Mac. He is scheduled to join us yet. Don't have him in the green room yet, but we're believing that he's going to stream in at 20 minutes after the hour like we ask all our guests to do. We'll get plenty of Eagle insight from Bo Wolf next here on Birds 365.